Welcome to episode 7 of The Haunted Hotel. I'm Nayara, guiding you onward as Raoul weaves the music, artwork and editing that sharpen every shadow. In this chapter, long-held suspicions begin to harden into certainty, and the hotel's secrets press dangerously close to the light. Chapter 14. As the summer months advanced, the transformation of the Venetian palace into the modern hotel proceeded rapidly towards completion. The outside of the building with its fine Palladian front, looking on the canal, was wisely left unaltered. Inside, as a matter of necessity, the rooms were almost rebuilt, so far at least as the size and the arrangement of them were concerned. The vast saloons were partitioned off into apartments containing 3 or 4 rooms each. The broad corridors in the upper regions afforded spare space enough for rows of little bedchambers devoted to servants and to travelers with limited means. Nothing was spared but the solid floors and the finely carved ceilings. These last, in excellent preservation as to workmanship, merely required cleaning and regilding here and there, to add greatly to the beauty and importance of the best rooms in the hotel. The only exception to the complete reorganization of the interior was at one extremity of the edifice, on the first and second floors. Here there happened in each case to be rooms of such comparatively moderate size and so attractively decorated that the architect suggested leaving them as they were. It was afterwards discovered that these were no other than the apartments formerly occupied by Lord Mulberry on the first floor and by Baron Drivard on the second. The room in which Mulberry had died was still fitted up as a bedroom and was now distinguished as number 14. The room above it, in which the Baron had slept, took its place on the hotel register as number 38. With the ornaments and the walls and ceilings cleaned and brightened up, and with the heavy old-fashioned beds, chairs, and tables replaced by bright, pretty, and luxurious modern furniture, these 2 promised to be at once the most attractive and the most comfortable bedchambers in the hotel. As for the once desolate and disused ground floor of the building, it was now transformed by means of splendid dining rooms, reception rooms, billiard rooms, and smoking rooms, into a palace by itself. Even the dungeon-like vaults beneath, now lighted and ventilated on the most approved modern plan, had been turned as if by magic into kitchens, servants' offices, ice rooms, and wine cellars, worthy of the splendor of the grandest hotel in Italy, in the now bygone period of 17 years since. Passing from the lapse of the summer months at Venice to the lapse of the summer months in Ireland, it is next to be recorded that Mrs. Rowland obtained the situation of attendant on the invalid Mrs. Carberry, and that the fair Miss Haldane, like a female Caesar, came, saw, and conquered on her first day's visit to the new Lord Mulberry's house. The ladies were as loud in her praises as Arthur Barville himself. Lord Mulberry declared that she was the only perfectly pretty woman he had ever seen who was really unconscious of her own attractions. The old nurse said she looked as if she had just stepped out of a picture and wanted nothing but a gilt frame round her to make her complete. Miss Haldane, on her side, returned from her first visit to the Mulberrys charmed with her new acquaintances. Later on the same day, Arthur called with an offering of fruit and flowers for Mrs. Carberry, and with instructions to ask if she was well enough to receive Lord and Lady Mulberry and Miss Lockwood and the Mora. In a week's time, the 2 households were on the friendliest terms. Mrs. Carberry, confined to the sofa by a spinal malady, had been hitherto dependent on her niece for one of the few pleasures she could enjoy: the pleasure of having the best new novels read to her as they came out. Discovering this, Arthur volunteered to relieve Miss Haldane at intervals in the office of reader. He was clever at mechanical contrivances of all sorts, and introduced improvements in Mrs. Carberry's couch, and in the means of conveying her from the bedchamber to the drawing-room, which alleviated the poor lady's sufferings and brightened her gloomy life. With these claims and the gratitude of the aunt aided by the personal advantages which he unquestionably possessed, Arthur advanced rapidly in the favor of the charming Miss. She was, it is needless to say, perfectly well aware that he was in love with her, while he was himself modestly reticent on the subject so far as words went. But she was not equally quick in penetrating the nature of her own feelings towards Arthur. Watching the two young people with keen powers of observation necessarily concentrated on them by the complete seclusion of her life, the invalid lady discovered signs of roused sensibility in Miss Haldane when Arthur was present, which had never yet shown themselves in her social relations with other admirers eager to pay their addresses to her. Having drawn her own conclusions in private, Mrs. Carberry took the first favorable opportunity in Arthur's interests of putting them to the test. "I don't know what I shall do," she said one day, "when Arthur goes away." Miss Haldane looked up quickly from her work. "Surely he is not going to leave us," she exclaimed. "My dear, he has already stayed at his uncle's house a month longer than he intended. His father and mother naturally expect to see him at home again." Miss Haldane met this difficulty with a suggestion which could only have proceeded from a judgment already disturbed by the ravages of the tender passion. "Why can't his father and mother go and see him at Lord Montbarry's?" she asked. "Sir Theodore's place is only 30 miles away, and Lady Marvell is Lord Montbarry's sister. They needn't stand on ceremony." "They may have other engagements," Mrs. Carberry remarked. "My dear aunt, we don't know that. Suppose you ask Arthur." "Suppose you ask him." Miss Haldane bent her head again over her work. Suddenly as it was done, her aunt had seen her face, and her face betrayed her. When Arthur came the next day, Mrs. Carberry said a word to him in private while her niece was in the garden. The last new novel lay neglected on the table. Arthur followed Miss Haldane into the garden. The next day he wrote home, enclosing in his letter a photograph of Miss Haldane. Before the end of the week, Sir Theodore and Lady Parville arrived at Lord Montbarry's and formed their own judgment of the fidelity of the portrait. They had themselves married early in life, and strange to say, they did not object on principle to the early marriages of other people. The question of age being thus disposed of, the course of true love had no other obstacles to encounter. Miss Haldane was an only child, and was possessed of an ample fortune. Arthur's career at the university had been creditable, but certainly not brilliant enough to present his withdrawal in the light of a disaster. As Sir Theodore's eldest son, his position was already made for him. He was 22 years of age, and the young lady was 18. There was really no producible reason for keeping the lovers waiting, and no excuse for deferring the wedding day beyond the first week in September. In the interval, while the bride and bridegroom would be necessarily absent on the inevitable tour abroad, a sister of Mrs. Carberry volunteered to stay with her during the temporary separation from her niece. On the conclusion of the honeymoon, the young couple were to return to Ireland and were to establish themselves in Mrs. Carberry's spacious and comfortable home. These arrangements were decided upon early in the month of August. About the same date, the last alterations in the old palace at Venice were completed. The rooms were dried by steam, the cellars were stocked, the manager collected round him his army of skilled servants, and the new hotel was advertised all over Europe to open in October. If you like this audio story, please consider to subscribe the channel and let us know what you like the most in this presentation. Chapter 15. Miss Agnes Lockwood to Mrs. Ferrari. I promised to give some account to Emily of the marriage of Mr. Arthur Parville and Miss Haldane. It took place 10 days since, but I have had so many things to look after in the absence of the master and mistress of this house that I am only able to write to you today. The invitations to the wedding were limited to members of the families on either side in consideration of the ill health of Miss Haldane's aunt. On the side of the Mulberry family, there were present, besides Lord and Lady Mulberry, Sir Theodore and Lady Parville, Mrs. Norbury, whom you may remember as his lordship's second sister, and Mr. Francis Westwick and Mr. Henry Westwick. The 3 children and I attended the ceremony as bridesmaids. We were joined by 2 young ladies, cousins of the bride, and very agreeable girls. Our dresses were white, trimmed with green in honor of Ireland, and we each had a handsome gold bracelet given to us as a present from the bridegroom. If you add to the persons whom I have already mentioned, the elder members of Mrs. Carberry's family, and the old servants in both houses, privileged to drink the healths of the married pair at the lower end of the room, you will have the list of the company at the wedding breakfast complete. The weather was perfect, and the ceremony with music was beautifully performed. As for the bride, no words can describe how lovely she looked, or how well she went through it all. We were very merry at the breakfast, and the speeches went off in the hall quite well enough. The last speech, before the party broke up, was made by Mr. Henry Westwick, and was the best of all. He offered a happy suggestion at the end which has produced a very unexpected change in my life here. As well as I remember, he concluded in these words, "On one point we are all agreed. We are sorry that the parting hour is near, and we should be glad to meet again." Why should we not meet again? This is the autumn time of the year. We are most of us leaving home for the holidays. What do you say, if we have no engagements that will prevent it, to joining our young married friends before the close of their tour, and renewing the social success of this delightful breakfast by another festival in honor of the honeymoon? The bride and bridegroom are going to Germany and the Tyrol on their way to Italy. I propose that we allow them a month to themselves, and that we arrange to meet them afterwards in the north of Italy, say at Venice. This proposal was received with great applause, which was changed into shouts of laughter by no less a person than my dear old nurse. The moment Mr. Westwick pronounced the word Venice, she started up among the servants at the lower end of the room and called out at the top of her voice, "Go to our hotel, ladies and gentlemen. We get 6% on our money already, and if you will only crowd the place and call for the best of everything, it will be 10% in our pockets in no time. Ask Master Henry." Appealed to in this irresistible manner, Mr. Westwick had no choice but to explain that he was concerned as a shareholder in a new hotel company at Venice, and that he had invested a small sum of money for the nurse, not very considerately as I think, in the speculation. Hearing this, the company, by way of humoring the joke, drank a new toast, success to the nurse's hotel and a speedy rise in the dividend. When the conversation returned in due time to the more serious question of the proposed meeting at Venice, difficulties began to present themselves, caused, of course, by invitations for the autumn which many of the guests had already accepted. Only 2 members of Mrs. Carberry's family were at liberty to keep the proposed appointment. On our side, we were more at leisure to do as we pleased. Mr. Henry Westwood decided to go to Venice in advance of the rest, to test the accommodation of the new hotel on the opening day. Mrs. Norbury and Mr. Francis Westwick volunteered to follow him, and after some persuasion, Lord and Lady Mulberry consented to a species of compromise. His lordship could not conveniently spare time enough for the journey to Venice, but he and Lady Mulberry arranged to accompany Mrs. Norbury and Mr. Francis Westwick as far on their way to Italy as Paris. 5 days since they took their departure to meet their travelling companions in London, leaving me here in charge of the 3 dear children. They begged hard, of course, to be taken with Papa and Mamma, but it was far better not to interrupt the progress of their education, and not to expose them, especially the 2 younger girls, to the fatigues of travelling. I have had a charming letter from the bride this morning dated Cologne. I cannot think how artlessly and prettily she assures me of her happiness. Some people, as they say in Ireland, are born to good luck, and I think Arthur Barville is one of them. When you next write, I hope to you that you are in better health and spirits, and that you continue to like your employment. Believe me, sincerely your friend, A.L. Agnes had just closed and directed her letter when the eldest of her 3 pupils entered the room with a startling announcement that Lord Mulberry's travelling servant had arrived from Paris. Alarmed by the idea that some misfortune had happened, she ran out to meet the man in the hall. Her face told him how seriously he had frightened her before she could speak. "There's nothing wrong, miss," he hastened to say. "My lord and my lady are enjoying themselves at Paris. They only want you and the young ladies to be with them." Saying these amazing words, he handed to Agnes a letter from Lady Mulberry. "Dearest Agnes," she read, "I am so charmed with a delightful change in my life. It is 6 years, remember, since I last travelled on the continent, that I have exerted all my fascinations to persuade Lord Mulberry to go on to Venice, and what is more to the purpose, I have actually succeeded. He has just gone to his room to write the necessary letters of excuse in time for the post to England. May you have as good a husband, my dear, when your time comes. In the meanwhile, the one thing wanting now to make my happiness complete is to have you and the darling children with us. Mulberry is just as miserable without them as I am, though he doesn't confess it so freely. He will have no difficulties to trouble you. Louise will deliver these hurried lines and will take care of you in the journey to Paris. Kiss the children for me 1,000 times, and never mind their education for the present. Pack up instantly, my dear, and I will be fonder of you than ever. Your affectionate friend, Adela Mulberry." Agnes folded up the letter and, feeling the need of composing herself, took refuge for a few minutes in her own room. Her first natural sensations of surprise and excitement at the prospect of going to Venice were succeeded by impressions of a less agreeable kind. With the recovery of her customary composure came the unwelcome remembrance of the parting words spoken to her by Mulberry's widow. "We shall meet again, here in England, or there in Venice, where my husband died, and meet for the last time." It was an odd coincidence, to say the least of it, that the march of events should be unexpectedly taking Agnes to Venice after those words had been spoken. Was the woman of the mysterious warnings and the wild black eyes still thousands of miles away in America, or was the march of events taking her unexpectedly too on the journey to Venice? Agnes started out of her chair, ashamed of even the momentary concession to superstition which was implied by the mere presence of such questions as these in her mind. She rang the bell and sent for her little pupils, and announced their approaching departure to the household. The noisy delight of the children, the inspiriting effort of packing up in a hurry roused all her energies. She dismissed her own absurd misgivings from consideration with the contempt that they deserved. She worked as all women can work when their hearts are in what they do. The travellers reached Devlin that day in time for the boat to England. 2 days later, they were with Lord and Lady Mulberry at Paris. If you like this audio story, please consider to subscribe the channel and let us know what you like the most in this presentation. Chapter 16. It was only the 20th of September when Agnes and the children reached Paris. Mrs. Norbury and her brother Francis had then already started on their journey to Italy, at least 3 weeks before the date at which the new hotel was to open for the reception of travellers. The person answerable for this premature departure was Francis Westwick. Like his younger brother Henry, he had increased his pecuniary resources by his own enterprise and ingenuity, with this difference that his speculations were connected with the arts. He had made money in the first instance by a weekly newspaper, and he had then invested his profits in a London theatre. This latter enterprise, admirably conducted, had been rewarded by the public with steady and liberal encouragement. Pondering over a new form of theatrical attraction for the coming winter season, Francis had determined to revive the languid public taste for the ballet by means of an entertainment of his own invention, combining dramatic interest with dancing. He was now accordingly in search of the best dancer possessed of indispensable personal attractions who was to be found in the theatres of the continent. Hearing from his foreign correspondents of two women who had made successful appearances, one at Milan and one at Florence, he had arranged to visit those cities and to judge of the merits of the dancers for himself before he joined the bride and bridegroom. His widowed sister, having friends at Florence whom she was anxious to see, readily accompanied him. The Mulberrys remained at Paris until it was time to present themselves at the family meeting in Venice. Henry found them still in the French capital when he arrived from London on his way to the opening of the new hotel. Against Lady Mulberry's advice, he took the opportunity of renewing his addresses to Agnes. He could hardly have chosen a more unpropitious time for pleading his cause with her. The gaieties of Paris, quite incomprehensibly to herself as well as to everyone about her, had a depressing effect on her spirits. She had no illness to complain of. She shared willingly in the ever-varying succession of amusements afforded to strangers by the ingenuity of the liveliest people in the world, but nothing roused her. She remained persistently dull and weary through it all. In this frame of mind and body, she was in no humour to receive Henry's ill-timed addresses with favour, or even with patience. She plainly and positively refused to listen to him. "Why do you remind me of what I have suffered?" she asked petulantly. "Don't you see that it has left its mark on me for life?" "I thought I knew something of women by this time," Henry said, appealing privately to Lady Mulberry for consolation, "but Agnes completely puzzles me. It is a year since Mulberry's death, and she remains as devoted to his memory as if he had died faithful to her. She still feels the loss of him, as none of us feel it. She's the truest woman that ever breathed the breath of life," Lady Mulberry answered. "Remember that and you will understand her. Can such a woman as Agnes give her love or refuse it according to circumstances? Because the man was unworthy of her, was he less the man of her choice? The truest and best friend to him, little as he deserved it in his lifetime, she naturally remains the truest and best friend to his memory now. If you really love her, wait and trust to your two best friends, to time and to me. There is my advice. Let your own experience decide whether it is not the best advice that I can offer. Resume your journey to Venice tomorrow, and when you take leave of Agnes, speak to her as cordially as if nothing had happened." Henry wisely followed this advice. Thoroughly understanding him, Agnes made the leave-taking friendly and pleasant on her side. When he stopped at the door for a last look at her, she hurriedly turned her head so that her face was hidden from him. "Was that a good sign?" Lady Mulberry, accompanying Henry down the stairs, said, "Yes, decidedly. Right when you get to Venice, we shall wait here to receive letters from Arthur and his wife, and we shall time our departure for Italy accordingly." A week passed, and no letter came from Henry. Some days later, a telegram was received from him. It was dispatched from Milan instead of from Venice, and it brought this strange message: "I have left the hotel. Will return on the arrival of Arthur and his wife. Address meanwhile, Albergo Real, Milan." Preferring Venice before all other cities of Europe and having arranged to remain there until the family meeting took place, what unexpected event had led Henry to alter his plans, and why did he state the bare fact without adding a word of explanation? Let the narrative follow him, and find the answer to those questions at Venice. If you like this audio story, please consider to subscribe the channel and let us know what you like the most in this presentation. Chapter 17. The Palace Hotel, appealing for encouragement mainly to English and American travelers, celebrated the opening of its doors as a matter of course by the giving of a grand banquet and the delivery of a long succession of speeches. Delayed on his journey, Henry Westwick only reached Venice in time to join the guests over their coffee and cigars. Observing the splendor of the reception rooms, and taking note especially of the artful mixture of comfort and luxury in the bedchambers, he began to share the old nurse's views of future, and to contemplate seriously the coming dividend of 10%. The hotel was beginning well at all events. So much interest in the enterprise had been aroused, at home and abroad, by profuse advertising, that the whole accommodation of the building had been secured by travellers of all nations for the opening night. Henry only obtained one of the small rooms in the upper floor by a lucky accident, the absence of the gentleman who had ridden to engage it. He was quite satisfied and was on his way to bed when another accident altered his prospects for the night and moved him into another and a better room. Ascending on his way to the higher regions as far as the first floor of the hotel, Henry's attention was attracted by an angry voice protesting in a strong New England accent against one of the greatest hardships that can be inflicted on a citizen of the United States, the hardship of sending him to bed without gas in his room. The Americans are not only the most hospitable people to be found on the face of the earth, they are, under certain conditions, the most patient and good-tempered people as well. But they are human, and the limit of American endurance is found in the obsolete institution of a bedroom candle. The American traveler, in the present case, declined to believe that his bedroom was in a complete finished state without a gas burner. The manager pointed to the fine antique decorations renewed and rebuilt on the walls and the ceiling, and explained that the emanations of burning gaslight would certainly spoil them in the course of a few months. To this the traveller replied that it was possible, but that he did not understand decorations. A bedroom with gas in it was what he was used to, was what he wanted, and was what he was determined to have. The compliant manager volunteered to ask some other gentlemen housed on the inferior upper story, which was lit throughout with gas, to change rooms. Hearing this, and being quite willing to exchange a small bedchamber for a large one, Henry volunteered to be the other gentleman. The excellent American shook hands with him on the spot. "You are a cultured person, sir," he said, "and you will no doubt understand the decorations." Henry looked at the number of the room and the door as he opened it. The number was 14. Tired and sleepy, he naturally anticipated a good night's rest. In the thoroughly healthy state of his nervous system, he slept as well in a bed abroad as in a bed at home. With the slightest assignable reason, however, his just expectations were disappointed. The luxurious bed, the well-ventilated room, the delicious tranquility of Venice by night, all were in favor of his sleeping well. He never slept at all. An indescribable sense of depression and discomfort kept him waking through darkness and daylight alike. He went down to the coffee room as soon as the hotel was astir and ordered some breakfast. Another unaccountable change in himself appeared with the appearance of the meal. He was absolutely without appetite. An excellent omelette and cutlets cooked to perfection he sent away untasted. He whose appetite never failed him, whose digestion was still equal to any demands on it. The day was bright and fine. He sat for a gondola and was rowed to the Lido. Out on the airy lagoon he felt like a moon man. He had not left the hotel 10 minutes before he was fast asleep in the gondola. Waking and reaching the landing place, he crossed the Lido and enjoyed a morning swim in the Adriatic. There was only a poor restaurant on the island in those days, but his appetite was now ready for anything. He ate whatever was offered to him like a famished man. He could hardly believe, when he reflected on it, that he had sent away untasted his excellent breakfast at the hotel. Returning to Venice, he spent the rest of the day in the picture galleries and the churches. Toward 6 o'clock, his gondola took him back with another fine appetite to meet some traveling acquaintances with whom he had engaged to dine at the table d'hôte. The dinner was deservedly rewarded with the highest approval by every guest in the hotel but one. To Henry's astonishment, the appetite with which he had entered the house mysteriously and completely left him when he sat down to table. He could drink some wine, but he could literally eat nothing. "What in the world is the matter with you?" his traveling acquaintances asked. He could honestly answer, "I know no more than you do." When night came, he gave his comfortable and beautiful bedroom another trial. The result of the second experiment was a repetition of the result of the first. Again he felt the all-pervading sense of depression and discomfort. Again he passed a sleepless night, and once more when he tried to eat his breakfast, his appetite completely failed him. This personal experience of the new hotel was too extraordinary to be passed over in silence. Henry mentioned it to his friends in the public room in the hearing of the manager. The manager, naturally zealous in defense of the hotel, was a little hurt at the implied reflection cast on number 14. He invited the travelers present to judge for themselves whether Mr. Westwick's bedroom was to blame for Mr. Westwick's sleepless nights, and he especially appealed to a grey-headed gentleman, a guest at the breakfast table as an English traveller, to take the lead in the investigation. "This is Dr. Bruno, our first physician in Venice," he explained. "I appealed to him to say if there are any unhealthy influences in Mr. Westwick's room." Introduced to number 14, the doctor looked around him with a certain appearance of interest which was noticed by everyone present. "The last time I was in this room," he said, "was on a melancholy occasion. It was before the palace was changed into an hotel. I was in professional attendance on an English nobleman who died here." One of the persons present inquired the name of the nobleman. Dr. Bruno answered without the slightest suspicion that he was speaking before a brother of the dead man. "Lord Mulberry." Henry quietly left the room without saying a word to anybody. He was not, in any sense of the term, a superstitious man, but he felt, nevertheless, an insurmountable reluctance to remaining in the hotel. He decided on leaving Venice. To ask for another room would be, as he could plainly see, an offence in the eyes of the manager. To remove to another hotel would be to openly abandon an establishment in the success of which he had a pecuniary interest. Leaving a note for Arthur Barville on his arrival in Venice, in which he merely mentioned that he had gone to look at the Italian lakes, and that a line addressed to his hotel at Milan would bring him back again, he took the afternoon train to Padua, and dined with his usual appetite and slept as well as ever that night. The next day, a gentleman and his wife, perfect strangers to the Mulberry family, returning to England by way of Venice, arrived at the hotel and occupied number 14. Still mindful of the slur that had been cast on one of his best bedchambers, the manager took occasion to ask the travellers the next morning how they liked their room. They left him to judge for himself how well they were satisfied by remaining a day longer in Venice than they had originally planned to do, solely for the purpose of enjoying the excellent accommodation offered to them by the new hotel. "We have met with nothing like it in Italy," they said. "You may rely on our recommending you to all our friends." On the day when number 14 was again vacant, an English lady travelling alone with her maid arrived at the hotel, saw the room, and at once engaged it. The lady was Mrs. Norbury. She had left Francis Westwick at Milan, occupied in negotiating for the appearance at his theatre of the new dancer at the Scala. Not having heard to the contrary, Mrs. Norbury supposed that Arthur Barville and his wife had already arrived at Venice. She was more interested in mooning the young married couple than in awaiting the result of the hired bargaining, which delayed the engagement of the new dancer, and she volunteered to make her brother's apologies if his theatrical business caused him to be late in keeping his appointment at the honeymoon festival. Mrs. Norbury's experience of number 14 differed entirely from her brother Henry's experience of the room. Falling asleep as readily as usual, her repose was disturbed by a succession of frightful dreams, the central figure in every one of them being the figure of her dead brother, the first Lord Mulberry. She saw him starving in a loathsome prison. She saw him pursued by assassins and dying under their knives. She saw him drowning in immeasurable depths of dark water. She saw him in a bed on fire, burning to death in the flames. She saw him tempted by a shadowy creature to drink and dying of the poisonous draught. The reiterated horror of these dreams had such an effect on her that she rose with the dawn of day, afraid to trust herself again in bed. In the old times, she had been noted in the family as the one member of it who lived on affectionate terms with Mulberry. His other sister and his brothers were constantly quarreling with him. Even his mother owned that her eldest son was of all her children the child whom she least liked. Sensible and resolute woman as she was, Mrs. Norbury shuddered with terror as she sat at the window of her room, watching the sunrise and thinking of her dreams. She made the first excuse that occurred to her when her maid came in at the usual hour and noticed how ill she looked. The woman was of so superstitious a temperament that it would have been in the last degree indiscreet to trust her with the truth. Miss Norbury merely remarked that she had not found the bed quite to her liking on account of the large size of it. She was accustomed at home as her maid knew to sleep in a small bed. Informed of this objection later in the day, the manager regretted that he could only offer to the lady the choice of one other bedchamber, numbered 38, and situated immediately over the bedchamber which she decided to leave. Mrs. Norbury accepted the proposed change of quarters. She was now about to pass her second night in the room occupied in the old days of the palace by Baron Rivard. Once more she fell asleep as usual, and once more the frightful dreams of the first night terrified her, following each other in the same succession. This time her nerves, already shaken, were not equal to the renewed torture of terror inflicted on them. She threw on her dressing gown and rushed out of her room in the middle of the night. The porter, alarmed by the banging of the door, met her hurrying headlong down the stairs in search of the first human being she could find to keep her company. Considerably surprised at this last new manifestation of the famous English eccentricity, the man looked at the hotel register and led the lady upstairs again to the room occupied by her maid. The maid was not asleep and, more wonderful still, was not even undressed. She received her mistress quietly. When they were alone and when Miss Mulberry had, as a matter of necessity, taken her attendant into her confidence, the woman made a very strange reply. "I have been asking about the hotel at the servants' supper tonight," she said. "The valet of one of the gentlemen staying here has heard that the late Lord Mulberry was the last person who lived in the palace before it was made into an hotel. The room he died in, ma'am, was the room he slept in last night. Your room tonight is the room just above it. I said nothing for fear of frightening you. For my own part, I have passed the night, as you see, keeping my light on and reading my Bible. In my opinion, no member of your family can hope to be happy or comfortable in this house." "What do you mean?" "Please to let me explain myself, ma'am. When Mr. Henry Westwick was here, I have this from the valet too. He occupied the room his brother died in without knowing it, like you. For 2 nights he never closed his eyes. Without any reason for it, the valet heard him tell the gentleman in the coffee room he could not sleep. He felt so low and so wretched in himself, and what is more, when daytime came, he couldn't even eat while he was under this roof. You may laugh at me, ma'am, but even a servant may draw her own conclusions. It is my conclusion that something's happened to my lord which we none of us know about when he died in this house. His ghost walks in torment until he can tell it, and the living persons related to him are the persons who feel he is near them. Those persons may yet see him in the time to come. Pray don't stay any longer in this dreadful place. I wouldn't stay another night here myself, no, not for anything that could be offered me. Mrs. Norbury at once set her servant's mind at ease on this last point. I don't think about it as you do, she said gravely, but I should like to speak to my brother of what has happened. We will go back to Milan. Some hours necessarily elapsed before they could leave the hotel by the first train in the forenoon. In that interval, Mrs. Norbury's maid found an opportunity of confidentially informing the valet of what had passed between her mistress and herself. The valet had other friends to whom he related the circumstances in his turn. In due course of time, the narrative, passing from mouth to mouth, reached the ears of the manager. He instantly saw that the credit of the hotel was in danger unless something was done to retrieve the character of the room numbered 14. English travellers well acquainted with the peerage of their native country informed him that Henry Westwick and Mrs. Norbury were by no means the only members of the Mulberry family. Curiosity might bring more of them to the hotel after hearing what had happened. The manager's ingenuity easily hit on the obvious means of misleading them in this case. The numbers of all the rooms were enamelled in blue and white china plates screwed to the doors. He ordered a new plate to be prepared bearing the number 13A, and he kept the room empty after its tenant for the time being had gone away until the plate was ready. He then renumbered the room, placing the removed number 14 on the door of his own room on the second floor, which, not being to let, had not previously been numbered at all. By this device, number 14 disappeared at once and forever from the books of the hotel as the number of a bedroom to let. Having warned the servants to beware of gossiping with travellers and the subject of the changed numbers under penalty of being dismissed, the manager composed his mind with the reflection that he had done his duty to his employers. Now, he thought to himself with an excusable sense of triumph, let the whole family come here if they like. The hotel is a match for them. This concludes episode 7 of The Haunted Hotel, narrated by Nayara, with Raoul shaping its atmosphere and final cut. If the mystery is tightening around you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Episode 8 draws nearer, and with it, the cost of the truth.